I believe we shall get started today. So thanks for coming out. I see even a couple of graduate students coming out today to support John. So without further ado, we have John Banghoff for this week's weather briefing.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. As Jake said, my name is John Banghoff, a second-year grad student. Hang out on the fourth floor quite a bit. I didn't have time. I was going to include a picture of Ohio State basketball big win over Purdue last night. Number 3 team in the country, I believe. I'm going to go ahead and foreshadow a Buckeye victory a week from today here in State College next week.
How did it go in Columbus last time?
It didn't go very well. It was a fluke. Penn State had a great game. It'll be fun. So last week, Elliot Abrams had a wonderful weather discussion, but didn't really talk much about January. So I thought since we're still kind of in the first week of February, we'd start with a recap there of what January looked like. So this particular graphic seems to indicate kind of below average snowfall just based on the coloration. But here in State College had under 8 inches of snow for January. Now looking at the departure, which I think is probably a little more illuminating for us, you can see this really tells the story. Northwestern Pennsylvania tended to have above average snowfall through January. Southeastern Pennsylvania a little bit above average, and then here in State College, I think probably all felt like this was the case, but to actually see it put into words here in State College, anywhere between 6 and 9 inches of snow below normal for the month of January. The other big story, in addition to kind of here in central Pennsylvania getting left out of the snow, was the temperature departures. So you can see, again, here in Center County, sitting between 3 and 5 degrees below average for the month of January. And as I was actually going back and looking at my weather briefing from about a year ago, it was kind of the February-March comparison, where February ended up being much warmer than March was overall on average. So maybe spend some time talking about that, kind of looking ahead. But at least for January, we ended up below average. Now, just going to show some radar imagery, because that's kind of my niche, working with Matt Cumgen. This is yesterday's storm, a loop of it, starting just before sunrise and then carrying on through the afternoon. This is reflectivity factor, horizontal reflectivity factor. And what you can see here is a lot of precipitation, but for a system like yesterday where we have a lot of temperature gradients and a lot of different precipitation types, reflectivity alone doesn't quite do a very good job. So what we're going to do is spend some time going through looking at correlation coefficient, also known as ρHV, and a differential reflectivity to kind of see how illuminated dual pole radar can be when it comes to these different precipitation types. So now we're going to, again, go ahead and look at ρHV. So this is correlation coefficient. You can see here, basically a couple things as this loops through to talk about. Higher correlation coefficient values correspond to basically more homogeneity of the column of air. And so in essence, if you have all rain, you're going to get a pretty high correlation coefficient. If you have all snow, pretty high correlation coefficient. If there's some mix, it's going to be a little bit lower. Biological scatterers and things that are non-meteorological are going to have really, really low correlation coefficients. This is commonly used in like tornado debris signatures when you're actually detecting debris. So as we're going through and looking at this, some of the darker purples and reds, those are going to correspond to kind of a uniform precipitation type. And as this goes back through, focusing on kind of the areas in yellow are going to indicate where we have some sort of precipitation transition within the layer. And so as this thing, we're winding down now, this was all snow after the cold front had moved through. So now here's what we're looking at. Down to the south, you can see pretty clearly, here's this line that would have delineated snow off to the north and then some sort of mixed precipitation, even some rain potentially mixing in down towards southeastern Pennsylvania. As we got into the early morning hours, you're going to see this line, this yellow, kind of move across State College. It kind of disappears for a little bit, but then shows up again, and we have this ring all the way around the radar. So basically what's happening here is the radar shoots up, it's going vertically, and so out to this point here, we have uniform precipitation, there's a melting layer, and then it moves farther off. So when that yellow line passed over the top of State College in the morning, that would have corresponded to when we shifted from snow to more of a kind of sleet, freezing rain regime. And then finally, you can see this nice yellow line across. That's when the cold front finally swept through and we transitioned back over to snow for at least a little bit. I'm going to run this through one more time just so we can specifically call these things out. So again, along the south here, early in the morning, you can see there's some sleet and some kind of freezing rain off to the southern part of the state. This began to nudge its way off to the north and east, and then we saw a precipitation changeover between about 8:30 and 9 o'clock here at 13:30 Z or so. Then we get the ring. This is when we're in kind of that solid sleet regime where you've got ice particles that are falling, transitioning over, and then kind of a uniform ice that's moving through. And then off to the north and west, you can see here as we move through the period, this yellow line corresponds to a pretty very thin melting level, basically that was moving across, and then we transitioned into all snow here on the back end. So these can be really illuminating. I think this is pretty common, especially on Twitter these days now, to be able to delineate. Yeah, what's up, Marissa?
Sorry to interrupt. The beginning of this loop. Are we seeing gravity waves?
So are you talking about kind of?
You can see those like southwest to northeast.
I think that's the ridge. So it's picking up on the ridges, the ridge network. It's just kind of, there's some ducting and things going on. And so I think that's more of what it's picking up on, since they're quasi-stationary throughout the entire loop. Yeah, we can see gravity waves sometimes in ρHV, but in this particular case, I think it's just the ridge system. So moving ahead then to look at ZDR, differential reflectivity, this basically gives an indication of the shape or the orientation of the scatter. So higher ZDR values correspond to more horizontally elongated particles, and ZDR near 0 corresponds to more circular. So in this particular image, the blues are going to be things that are more circular, and then the yellows and kind of getting into oranges and reds are going to indicate things that are more horizontally elongated. This corresponds pretty well with ρHV. Made this loop a little bit faster because we don't need to spend quite as much time on it. But as this kind of transitions, here's the end, a lot of blues, those are going to correspond to probably some ice pellets, but also some dendritic growth. Now, starting the loop over down to the south, I don't think you can really see my mouse, so I apologize for that. But raindrops in kind of ice pellets are going to be more horizontally elongated, so that's why you get higher ZDR values. You'll begin to see that melting layer show up pretty nicely here across around the radar. And then from the northwest, we can see the cold front as it moves through, and we then transition back over to snow. So on a day like today, when we have all snow, it's going to be you're going to be able to, you're not going to be able to see a melting layer. When we get into some mixed precipitation type regimes, that's when it's going to be a little bit more effective. I really like using these dew point variables to be able to differentiate and kind of tell with ground truth what's happening up in the atmosphere above us. One other neat signature, actually pulled this off of Rob Schramm, one of the guys in our research group. He's a PhD student. And what you can see here is kind of the classic melting layer, both in correlation coefficient and in ZDR. What we see near the surface here is a little bit of heightened ZDR near the radar, near the surface. And basically, what Rob has surmised, and they've actually published a paper on this, is that what you're seeing here is snowflakes that are freezing to the outside of ice pellets as they're getting near the surface. So you're ending up, as the temperatures are much cooler near the surface, you've got snow that's refreezing on the ice pellets, leading to a little bit more horizontal elongation of those particles. And so kind of an interesting signature as we dive in a little bit further and see what's going on radar. Now, a couple of pictures I pulled off of some of the students here who are working on the Snowflake Selfie project. We see some really, really neat different habits of snow and ice particles falling from the sky. So on the right-hand side here, you can see some capped columns. On the left-hand side, you can see some plates. Just a really, really, really cool thing. Even yesterday when I went out to the bus stop, had a black jacket on, and just seeing the dendrites fall on my jacket, just phenomenal to see the complexity. And even, I mean, to some extent, like looking all six-pointed, but then you get some of these different habits. Another picture from Matt Ludwig. Those were from Jake, the ones I showed previously. And then here's some more, again, some capped columns, and then some kind of aggregates that are mixing in here. Thought it would be an interesting thing here. Many of you have probably seen this. This comes from Ken Liebrecht's paper, The Physics of Snow Crystals, and he's got this picture here. On the x-axis is temperature, and on the y-axis is supersaturation, corresponding to the various habits that you see falling in a regime like this. And so for yesterday's storm, we tended to see some of these columns and capped columns, and then some plates. And so we tended to have warmer-ish temperatures on the scale, again, because we're dealing with some mixed precipitation that's going on, so it wasn't particularly cold, and some fairly low supersaturations as well. But we also did see yesterday some more kind of complex dendrites. In general, the more complicated the habits are, the higher the supersaturation is going to be, or basically how many percentage points above 100% do we have in the atmosphere. again, kind of cool how you can look at what's happening on the ground and have some predictive factor about what's happening several kilometers in the air above us. So now let's transition into talking a little bit about the weather that we can expect heading into the next couple of days. So as we start, let's go ahead and just look at 500 millibar heights. We'll kind of do a top-down view here as this loads up. So looking at the continental United States, so here we have kind of this big trough system that we're in right now. Generally some unstable weather and several short waves move through. So as we head into the weekend, let me actually just blow this up for us so we can see it a little more clearly. So again, we got a trough that's going to be kind of trying to nudge its way out of here heading into the weekend. So this is tomorrow morning. You get more of a zonal flow pattern. And in fact, what we're going to see is there's going to be another weak disturbance, a little bit of short wave that's going to bring a chance for some snow heading into the day tomorrow. Nothing too magnificent because we don't have much amplification in the 500 millibar pattern or really in the atmospheric pattern in general. And then heading into the early part of next week, we kind of stay in this zonal regime, so we can probably expect some, every couple of days, some sort of weak pattern coming through, bringing a chance for a few quick bursts of snow. And then we really start to amplify as we head into kind of, I guess, early part of next week. Now this is Sunday afternoon, seeing the chance for another system to rear its ugly head in and bring us at least a chance for some more unsettled weather. We're also seeing kind of a ridge developing, and so we could expect some ushering in some warmer conditions, and we'll see that specifically for the day on Sunday. And then as we kind of track this through, that low pressure system or that big trough that's going to be developing is going to bring us potentially some weather into the later part of next week. There's a 500 millibar height pattern. Let me just back out of this and then just get kind of an overview. Let's go ahead and look at our temperature and wind barbs just so we can kind of see, again, corroborating what we were just seeing there. So kind of in this general trough pattern, purple's corresponding to 10 to, 5 to 15 degrees, and then getting in the whites and blues is more in the 20 to 30 realm. So this is, I guess, tonight. Apologize, it seems like there's some lag between my screen and what I'm seeing here, so I'm just going to look up here now. So as we move through Friday morning, still going to be in kind of this high pressure-ish pattern off to our south and east. And then we do end up seeing a little bit of warmth usher its way in from the south. Some southerly flow near the surface going to bring us a little bit warmer conditions. It doesn't look like temperatures are going to be certainly abnormally warm, but certainly a little bit of reprieve before the next cold front begins to kind of sag its way south and will push through. This is now Sunday afternoon. It looks like Sunday into Monday we could expect kind of a return to some more cooler conditions, but perhaps if we get any precipitation Saturday into Sunday, it would be more in the form of rain than in the form of snow. So let's go ahead and back out here. One of the things that I've enjoyed kind of looking at is the NCAR ensemble forecast. This can be kind of a nice indication. I especially like it for bigger end snow systems. We're not really going to have any of that, but just to get an idea, looking through 6-hour accumulation, just to kind of see what we may be looking at here. Look at the ensemble mean heading through the next couple of days. And so this is picking up on the chance again. So this is valid for, looks like 6Z to 12Z on Saturday morning. So this is picking up on the chance of potentially some snowfall. I tend to think it's maybe going to fall more in the form of rain. But what we can look here and see.
Yeah, that's actually.
Oh, is it old?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Is it done like for good? Well, thank you for letting me know that. I was just glancing. I was like, yeah, this seems like it's reasonable, picking up on something or other.
Like the default high-res ensemble kind of filling in the gaps, but not as good.
Got it. Well, thank you for letting me know that. Well, that was a good source for information. Now it is no longer. So let's go ahead and look at tropical tidbits. Just get an idea. I also like this site quite a bit to just kind of click through and see. This gives us more of an idea of the pattern we're talking about. So as I talked about previously, we've got kind of high pressure up to the south and east. Here's the system we're going to be watching as we head into kind of the early part of Saturday. This looks like it's going to be snow, maybe potentially for far northern Pennsylvania. We could see a little bit of snow mixing on the back end, but any precipitation we get here will likely be in the form of rain by and large through the evening, excuse me, Saturday night. Tend to fill in a little bit more with some more rain, so I would expect probably some rain. Not a whole lot of accumulations, at least where we're at, maybe some slightly higher totals down towards where the low pressure system is going to track. It will depend specifically on that where that low tracks. And then as we kind of cross the 540 millibar, or yeah, the 540 height line, we will see that kind of transition over to snow. But it looks like by that point, most of the moisture and the actual uplift associated with the low will be displaced. And so not expecting a whole lot of accumulation in terms of snowfall heading into the early part of next week. Probably expecting, again, some kind of flurries as we head through the later part of today, some that I guess are a little bit stronger, and then not a whole lot of accumulation. Let's pop over and check out, let's go to CTP, check out radar imagery. I guess we could also look right over there, but I want to just pull this up. This is not a great image of it, but what we're seeing here is some open cellular convection. So my area of expertise is horizontal convective rolls. Jake was asking if I was going to include any. Don't have any for you today, but something similar we're looking at this point is kind of this open cellular convection, which forms by similar mechanisms as horizontal convective rolls, but based on kind of the amount of shear and the amount of uplift that's occurring, it just ends up organizing itself into a slightly different orientation, which is why we're going to get more of these bursts. So oftentimes snow squalls, when you see them in horizontal convective rolls, move through pretty quickly, and they may be concentrated over one particular area for a decent amount of time because they tend to be oriented about approximately parallel to the mean wind. But with open cell convection, it tends to be a little bit more irregular. So on a day like today, we're not going to see wild accumulations with these particular systems. It's going to be kind of a burst here, a burst there. Not a whole lot of consistency with this particular system. So certainly keep an eye on that this afternoon as some of this open cell convection moves through. We may even get some bursts of sunshine. Looked out earlier this morning, and when we're not in one of these, bursts of snow, you can see some more sunshine popping through. So let's go ahead and look at the regional loop for the NAM 4-panel. This is, I think, going to tell us a similar story, but really just want to focus on kind of the near term through the day today, and then heading into the day tomorrow. So currently, right now, we're kind of looking, let me just make sure I'm looking at the right model that I want to look at here. I didn't just click on the wrong thing. So I don't have another, so it's like 12Z models, we're good here. 4-panel NAM is what we're going to be looking at. So we're hanging out about in the 20s today. There's really not a lot of exciting weather to talk about in the short term as we're looking through. I'm going to get a little bit more southerly flow, as if I can, let me zoom out just a little bit here. Yeah, that'll do. So some southerly flow heading into the day on Friday and then into Saturday. We do start to see some of these greens moving in. I don't know how much you're actually going to get up to State College. It tends to be more southwest and southeast that gets in on the warmer conditions. But then we've got kind of this sweeping cold front moving through. We're going to bring a chance for some precipitation. And if we just look at kind of the QPF of what the NAM is showing, looks like southeast Pennsylvania is going to be closer to that low pressure system as it moves through. We're going to bring a pretty nice swath of precipitation to the far southeast. But here, as is fairly typical, and I think we're pretty used to, minimal precipitation relative to other places for here in State College. So that kind of dictates this weekend and the early part of next week. The other thing I want to look at is some of the kind of longer range looks for kind of what we can expect for the later part of February and into March. So this is the CFS kind of weekly height anomaly, basically. And so what we can see here, we've got high pressure off to the south and east currently. Heading into the early part of next week, looks like we could start pushing into more of a ridge pattern. A little bit more warm. Some of the models are beginning to pick up on this. Some warmer conditions for the later part of February. And then heading into the earlier part of March, it's maybe a little bit less clear for eastern part of the United States. Northeast could stay, again, still kind of in that warmer, that anomalously warmer regime. And then, again, this is still relatively far out, but the early part of March looks like we could see a little bit of a shift, a little more cooler conditions. So not dissimilar to what we saw a year ago. I don't expect it to be quite the dichotomy with a particularly warm February and a much colder March, but this is hinting at least the early part of March could be a little bit cooler. And we could stay in that pattern through some of March. So at this point, just kind of looking at the CFS model, it seems like February could be a little bit on the warmer side, but not overly warm. And then heading into March could stay a little bit cooler. But again, by the end of March, there's not much signal here, pretty much equal chances one way or the other. So that's all I have in terms of the forecast, but wanted to open it up and see if there's anything else you guys were interested in kind of looking at or talking about over the course of the next few days, maybe in some other part of the country. Yeah.
Well, I think the snowstorm in Chicago for tonight and tomorrow is pretty interesting, especially the European model actually completely disagrees on just the QPF amount in addition to the strong gradient. So yeah, forecast discussion from Chicago this morning was really well written, I thought. And see, it's kind of a non-traditional moisture source from Chicago. But a lot of the moisture is actually being brought in from the Pacific and not. It's kind of a question of how much is going to get up from the Gulf. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. Very good point. Let's go ahead and the 3-kilometer NAM seems to have handled the storm we had yesterday fairly well in terms of backing off on totals. So let's take a look and see what this has to say, even in terms of cumulative snowfall. Now, I know this is just one deterministic model, but using the kind of Kuchera ratio seems to do a better job. So let's just kind of see. Yeah, has, again, the same system that's going to be affecting far northern Pennsylvania and New York heading into the day tomorrow, bringing a chance for a swath of decent snowfall totals. It looks like on the order of 8 to 12 in a lot of places. But a forecast like this is pretty difficult because you can see here 0.6 inches to 6.2 in a matter of what, 20, 30, 40 miles.
You can drive that in under half an hour.
What's that?
I can drive that in under half an hour.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. So somebody will likely end up in the gradient here, and I'd be surprised if the forecast everywhere is really good. But I would imagine this particular model is picking up on kind of this swath that's moving through. Rob, do you remember what the forecast session said in terms of?
Yeah, it just talked about, in addition to just shift between the models of where the gradient was set up, which is what you'd expect. There's actual real disagreement. And basically NAM and GFS were pretty consistent in the QPF, but the ECMWF actually had a lot less just total QPF.
Interesting.
Yeah. Brought up. So.
I see.
I just thought that was interesting. Normally that's not the major source of uncertainty in these things.
Right. You usually don't see that sort of thing. Can somebody help me out here with, is this the euro right here?
Are you go down to the bottom?
Go to the bottom left,
Yeah,
it says
bottom
radar.
Yeah. Click on one of the regional
You
links.
could, or you could even try. Yeah,
That one.
But that's.
You're gonna have to zoom.
No, not that one.
Not that
And then
one?
you gotta go to the left bottom.
Oh, there's one up top.
Down in the.
Legacy.
There you go.
Yeah, it's right there.
I thought he was there. Oh, it doesn't know he's on.
It's in the left
No,
side.
it's not gonna happen with that.
Wait, are you looking at,
Find another one.
are you looking at precipitation from the European model? Or?
Yeah,
I could try to help him.
if you don't mind. I'm not well versed in that.
US, my.
Yes, maybe we can go see our friend.
It's
It was a Swiss boys group
so, yeah.
forecast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. Select parameter.
Saw that.
Total precipitation.
The one that
I've not used this a whole lot, clearly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
very
click through.
slowly, but.
We'll load it up. This will give us an idea of the euro, and then we can all remember what the name was that we just looked at.
What's this QPF though? It's on snow total.
Right. So at least the swath looks similar. So it must have been just a QPF
There's a
difference.
magnitude.
Got it, in terms of how much.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think it's gonna be tough. Comparison.
Let's see if we can do QPF from the NAM. Let's see. Adaptation.
You just do snowfall 10 to 1 and multiply by 10.
I guess that's true. Let's do cumulative QPF and see.
He doesn't want to be half out.
No, we'll just pull it from here. Yeah, so this looks like a swath of, yeah, about half to an inch total. And then looking at the euro, it's a little hard to tell based on how coarse everything is. But this seems to be.
You can probably zoom into, you might be able to see.
If I remember from the forecast discussion this morning, I think they were talking about the US model being closer to an inch of PPF and the euro being closer to a half inch.
Got it.
You could probably just look up their forecast discussion.
Yeah, that seems about right what we're looking at. So that bears watching, certainly. And that's, I guess, tonight into tomorrow, it'll be interesting to kind of see, half here in Chicago and then tapering off. The gradient is still pretty strong there compared to what we're looking at here. It seems like the track is pretty well in hand, but it'll be interesting to see kind of the snowfall accumulation expectations. Let's actually go to come on. See if this will work. They're still going through track. See what they're expecting in terms of. Yeah, so this seems to be pretty nice kind of messaging. Sharp cutoff somewhere in this area. Potential for significant snowfall totals to the north, a little bit west to the south, but a sharp gradient certainly in it. So this will certainly bear watching to see kind of where everyone ends up. And it looks like we've got winter storm warnings posted for most of the area with a sharp cutoff to not a whole lot off to the south. So very interesting system. If you're in Chicago, probably going to end up with something, but certainly more off to the north, it seems like. Anything else?
I was going to say they're awfully confident going up only warnings and political discussions. At least getting a little upper watch just in case it comes out.
It's very interesting to see the map
Sure, I
itself.
totally agree with that.
South of Chicago, they like to issue warnings.
Yeah.
In winter weather rather than watches and advisories. I don't know.
And it's
Surprised they
interesting.
have some sort of buffer there just
Yeah.
in case, like,
It's interesting they've got a couple.
Buffering, so I feel like the two counties to the south.
yeah.
Yeah, you think like this county maybe, but certainly will be an impactful storm. Fortunately, will be overnight, so we'll probably be able to cancel schools and all that stuff. And
It's pretty. They don't cancel schools much in Chicago.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I think when I was in high school, we had school canceled once, and it was that big Groundhog Day blizzard when the Lakeshore Drive was shut down.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Cool. Well, it's about 1:30. So if nobody else has any questions, that'll be today's weather discussion.
So I have one side question for you. I know you alluded to an Ohio State victory next week. What do you think the score margin would be in that game?
It'll be a close game for sure. Playing in the BJC, it'll be tight. But I think I don't think Penn State can keep up their 3-point shooting percentage as high as it was last time around. So we'll say under 5, but Ohio State will get the win.
Over under and dunks.
Penn State will dunk quite a bit, it seems like. They like to do that, especially against the rival Ohio State. They'll be nice and bold.
All right, well, thanks, John.
Yep.
And next week we'll have Dave Martin.
Thanks, everybody.